extremely lucky to have Joyce Poole with us. Joyce is the co-founder and co-director of ElephantVoices. She is really the world expert authority on elephants. She studied their social behavior, the communication patterns of African elephants for over 30 years, and she'll tell us about that. And as far as I think you've dedicated your life to understanding and conserving the welfare of African elephants. And Joyce is, we were lucky enough actually that Jim Simons introduced us to Joyce. And he said that we should talk to her because I was telling him about the sperm whale project. And I'm so grateful to you that you were willing to bestow on us your wisdom, and extremely looking forward to your talk. I know you have so much to give, so your studies of ivory poaching and so many things about African elephants, and I've read some of your books. I think that you're the best person to open this workshop, and please take the floor and have 5 more minutes so we can actually benefit from your entire talk. I think you need to now share your screen, correct?
I do, Shafi. Let me do that first. Share, and I need to get this on to slideshow. Yeah. Okay, so let me start by thanking you, Shafi, and David and Michael and the Simons Institute for inviting me. I feel so privileged to be able to speak to you today, because although I feel I know a lot about elephants, in some ways I feel that I don't know all that much about communication, the topic in general. So I'm Joyce Poole. I'm actually the scientific director of ElephantVoices, and I'm going to try and give you a window into the information contained in the voices of African elephants, at least as I understand it. I began studying, and I want to just say, please put on earphones, because these voices are very low frequency, many of them, and they just don't do very well coming out of the computer speaker. I began studying the African elephants in Amboseli National Park in 1975. And my early work was focused on the behavior of males in the sexual and aggressive state of must. And I documented the postures and displays of must males, and including a very low frequency vocalization that I called a must rumble. And my discovery in 1984, together with Katie Payne, that this and other African elephant rumbles contained frequencies below the level of human hearing, led to a long-term study of elephant communication, during which I have focused not only on their vocalizations, but also on their other behaviors. In the early 2000s, my husband, Petter Granli, Norwegian, that's why I'm in Norway, and I formed ElephantVoices with the aim of studying the voices and the behavior of elephants, as well as acting as a voice for elephants. And we've worked together on elephant communication and conservation projects in Amboseli and Masai Mara in Kenya, and in Gorongosa, Mozambique, where this picture was taken. These projects have allowed us to observe how elephants with different histories and habitats behave. During the last few years, we have built and are currently populating an online, fully searchable database that we're calling the Elephant Ethogram, a library of African elephant behavior, which we hope to have publicly available later this year. And the ethogram describes over 273 behaviors now, and a behavior being a unique movement or action, and another 85 behavioral constellations, which are a suite of behaviors that typically occur together. And each of these occur in one or more contexts. So it's, as I said, it's fully searchable. So all these specific searches you can take: age, active body part, communication mode, and so on. And here I've selected acoustic vocal. And so listed below then are all the behaviors that are vocalizations that we have documented that we think we have some understanding of, as well as the behavioral constellations in which vocalizations occur. I'm going to show you what happens here when you click on must rumble, for example. Up comes the must rumble page on which the must rumble is described, as well as video and eventually photo and audio exemplars. So what do we know about African savanna elephants? This is so brief, we know a lot, but they have a complex fission-fusion society. They have an unusually large social network, relationships radiating out from the mother-offspring bond through family, bond group, clan, to the entire population, and even beyond to strangers. Mothers and daughters remain closely associated for life, and males leave their families when they're about 14 years old. They're very long-lived animals, and if left alone by us human beings, they could live up to 70 years. They're large-brained, they have good memories, they're intelligent, they're capable of empathy, social and vocal learning, behavioral innovation, and they're self-aware. They can make really subtle discriminations based on sound, on scent, and touch. And they have rituals around birth, death, greetings, and matings, etc. So what do we know about African elephant acoustic communication? Well, calls originate in the larynx and in the trunk. Laryngeal call types include the very low frequency rumbles, higher frequency calls, husky cries, grunts, barks, and novel or imitated calls. The trunk call types are the trumpets, nasal trumpets, snorts, as well as novel or imitated calls. And then there are combination calls, like combining two types of calls, a rumble roar or a rumble roar rumble, a cry rumble, and so on. They may present as an isolated call, a bout of single calls, antiphonal calling, overlapping or chorused calling. And 58% of calls are overlapping. So that creates a challenge for analysis. The most common call type is the rumble, and these make up 90% of calls among free-ranging African savanna elephants. So work by Soltis et al. Found that using multidimensional scaling analysis indicated that there were no acoustically distinct rumble subtypes, though he did find quantitative variation across rumbles. And later work showed that the variation in rumbles reflects individual identity, and the voices express both positive and negative emotions as measured in amplitude, duration, variation in fundamental frequencies, voice roughness, verse format, location, but again, did not find evidence of subtypes. Yet, in my own work, I found that specific acoustic patterns of rumbles, as in the sequence of them or what they sound like, of rumbles, trumpets, and roars, can be related to specific behavioral contexts, and they're associated with particular body, ear, and trunk postures. More recently, Soltis, again, now working among free-living elephants, found that African elephants have distinctive referential alarm calls for humans and also for African honeybees. And this discovery supports the existence of rumble subtypes. So before I get into the rumbles, I want to talk about some of these other call types, just to give you an idea of the variety. So husky cries are produced by newborns and infants when they're touched, alarmed, or distressed. And mothers and allo mothers respond immediately to these calls with comforting and reassuring and helping behavior, as well as what I call coo rumbles. So here's an example of Eudora's hours-old infant calling when it was touched roughly by a male. very hoarse sound. And infant Emmett calling when in trouble. His mother Ella rushes to help. And then there are cries. Cries are produced by infants and calves. And these are tonal calls that are typically produced as a combination call, as in a cry rumble or a rumble cry rumble. And they're produced by begging, complaining, or protesting calves. And mothers respond to cries by helping the calf, allowing it to suckle, or if weaning, if they ignore the calf, then the calf will escalate to roaring. So here's a cry rumble by Lewa, age 1, as he's pestered by an older calf. Another cry rumble by Elaine, same age, as she's stuck, lying down, unable to get up. And then the same individual, age 4, while begging a cry rumble, while begging for a palm heart from her mother, Edwina, who attempts to push her away. Roars, they're very powerful calls produced by all age sex classes, and subtypes can be tonal, noisy, mixed tonal and noisy, or produced as combination calls. For example, a roar rumble or a rumble roar rumble. Roars express protest, hunger, pain, anger, or high-level social arousal. And those produced in anger, protest, or hunger, pain elicit attention or assistance from other elephants. Those produced during intense social excitement overlap with chorused rumbles. So here is Amy's 1-year-old calf roaring when a lion pounces on her, and the entire family came to her rescue. And Ejak, age 3, roaring as he's pushed into the swamp, and his mother Enid came to rescue him. Here is infant explorer roar rumbling in distress, and his mother Elsbeth ran to the swamp to help him from the swamp. Here is a teenage male roaring when tusked by an adult female. A 3-year-old calf is separated from her mother and gives a rumble, roar, rumble. We found that separated calves often give this kind of a combination call. And an adult female gives a pulsated estrus roar as she's chased by males. And these roars are very characteristic, and they will cause attract more males. And then Ebony, age 6, contributes a rumble, roar, rumble to a greeting ceremony. And then there are trumpets. Everybody knows about elephant trumpets. These are produced by all age sex classes except newborns. So there's several subtypes that I recognize. Protest trumpet, alarm trumpet, trumpet blast against predators, a trump, pulsated trumpet, nasal trumpet, and a sort of catch-all social trumpets. Depending on the type, trumpets are used to intimidate or express alarm, surprise, annoyance, protest, intense level of social arousal, such as during a bonding ceremony or during social play. So here's an example of what I call a protest trumpet. A mother as her infant is pushed by a young male. And here an alarm trumpet. This little calf, age 2, Ejak, is separated from his mother, and then his mother is calling to him. trumpet blasts. This is the famous ambushed Ghidorah when she's charging us in Gorongosa. A trump during social play. This was a young male challenging us. A pulsated trumpet, an adult female during exuberant play. This is typical of exuberant play. And also during exuberant play are nasal trumpets. This is a juvenile. And then there's social trumpets. I call them social trumpets because they occur during these bonding ceremonies. And what I'm going to play to you are family members at an elephant birth. And you'll notice that they're rather similar to the play trumpets, really variable. And then the novel calls, and those acquired through vocal learning. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the paper that we produced in 2005, where we documented an elephant who was imitating the sound of trucks on the Mombasa Road that were 3 kilometers away. So here is one example of this female, and you can see that on the spectrogram, the first one there, the distant trucks. They make all sorts of weird sounds through their trunks. Sometimes it seems just for fun. Here is a squelch. And then the last one is that I have here is croaking. We first heard this by one female in one family in Amboseli, and soon it was picked up by another female in the same family, and now it has been passed to another family. It's possible that this is imitating crickets. There's a lot of sound of the elephant feeding on grass during this, so you'll have to listen for the cricket-like sound. I want to jump to Asian elephants just for a second. I'm not sure if any of you heard about this elephant called Kosik. At the time that we published the paper, the 2005 paper, we were contacted by someone from Everland Zoo in Korea, telling us about this elephant who imitated his keeper and was able to say a number of different words that people could understand. And Angela Stoeger went over and recorded and found he was able to produce 9 different words that were readily understood by Korean speakers. And it's quite phenomenal. We thought it was a hoax at first, but he uses the tip of his trunk up against the roof of his mouth and against his tongue to produce these sounds. So you can see that there's quite a wide variety of sounds and a very flexible vocal tract that elephants have on offer. Now moving to the rumbles, which make up 90% of the calls. Rumbles are produced by all age sex classes. All except some produced by young calves contain minimum fundamental frequency below the level of human hearing. and most contain upper harmonics in the audible range. Duration may be anywhere from less than a second to just under 12 seconds. Older individuals' calls are lower in frequency and longer in duration. And you can see here on the graph, the 0As are animals less than 5 years old, whereas the blue triangles, the class 5s, are animals over 45. You can see that there are some very short rumbles also by that age group, but those are these the different subtypes that I think exist. Some calls are very powerful, 103 decibels at 5 meters from the source, whereas others are barely audible. As I said, I think there are distinct subtypes that can be distinguished by context, associated behaviors, call quality, and measurement, and that these communicate different emotions, needs, desires, sexual state, and other more specific information. Some calls are very distinctive, like the must rumble, while others are more graded and more difficult to distinguish. Elephants can recognize the voices of close associates up to 2.5 kilometers away. And they can recognize the voices of at least 200 other adult elephants. That is the other elephants that would be in their clan. So recently, Angela Stoiger has come out with a paper describing oral versus nasal rumbles. So oral rumbles are emitted from the mouth, as in the mouth is open, so they're open-mouthed rumbles, while nasal rumbles are emitted from the trunk. And oral rumbles are associated with higher formants, shorter vocal tract, and nasal rumbles with lower formants and a longer nasal tract. And elephants are able to adjust the vocal paths, nasal, oral, to actively vary vocal tract length with considerable variation in formats. And as I said, oral rumbles are typically associated with high arousal and open mouth calling. So just to give you an idea of the difference, the first call is what I call a begging rumble by Ella's 1-year-old calf. This is begging to suckle. And here is a baroo rumble by a complaining rumble by Elsbeth, 1-year-old infant, after being pushed away from another infant by Eudora. You can really hear the complaining tone in that baroo rumble. So these, I'm not going to go into detail here, but these are the rumbles that I refer to or recognize. Some are nasal rumbles, some are oral rumbles, and some, like a contact rumble, falls in both categories, and I'll come back to that. So I distinguish these by the context and associated behavior, by sound quality, and many of them by measurement. So there are different patterns of calling. There's single isolated call, and a must rumble is a good example of that, but there are also what I call a V8 rumble, grumble rumble, comment rumble, and others. But just, I want to show you some of the associated behavior of these some particular calls in different calling patterns. So this particular call is a very distinctive pulsated rumble that's given by males in the heightened sexual and aggressive state of must, and each male has a very different call. Sounding call. It's associated with particular behaviors, ear waving, trunk dragging, urine dribbling, foot scuffing, and if there are females nearby, it will be answered by a female chorus. So these calls are given as a threat, in this case, to me, during escalated contests, in response to other low frequency sounds, including approaching airplanes and cars, when drinking, mud splashing, or marking, when approaching a group of females, and immediately prior to mating. So watch for his trunk dragging and his ears. And then there are bouts of single calls. And I'm going to show a little video of a grumble rumbles, a bunch of grumble rumbles. And these are undulating rumbles of medium duration with an audibly detectable complaining or whining tone. And they're typically heard when the calling elephant has been thwarted in some way or mistreated. And it may escalate to a baru rumble, a louder, more open-mouthed call. It's not associated with any kind of ear flapping. In this video, Nalakiti, who's the tuskless female there, has her 6 and 10-year-old sons begging for food from her. And she's gets a bit fed up and she gives a grumble rumble. And she shares 2 twigs with them, but the younger one can't reach them. And he grumble rumbles and then he tusks her. He's very naughty. She redirects aggression toward her older son, who grumble rumbles. And meanwhile, the younger son goes around behind her and she kicks back at him. She's really getting fed up and he grumble rumbles. And then he comes around the other side and begs and she head swipes at him and he grumble rumbles. So you can hear from different age animals how this call sounds similar from one to the next. That's the mother. She drops a twig. They're really rather a lot like our families. And then there's antiphonal calling by 2 or more individuals. And I'm going to show you, I give an example of a contact rumbles between Eudora and Edwina and some distant elephants. And you can see on this, on the spectrogram, you can see the distant elephants, but you can't really hear them as only the very low frequencies persist. So here we go. You don't hear the distant. The 2 elephants talking on top of one another. A distant answer again. And then the 2 calling again. And another distant call. So the contact rumble is really distinctive. Has a very distinctive pattern of antiphonal calling between closely bonded individuals who are separated. But yet, even though I call it a contact rumble or contact calling, the calls can be quite different one from the next. So there's an initial call that tends to be an oral rumble, and the answer an oral rumble. And then there's a confirmation, what I think of as a confirmation call, which is a nasal rumble. And all of these have slightly different forms or tones and format modulation. For instance, the answer is a very sudden, abrupt call, whereas the call going out has almost a sort of a more question mark sound to it. And these are associated with head raising when the elephant suddenly hears a sound, with the ears stiff, and listening behavior that involves the head swinging back and forth to try and localize a sound, and then ear flapping when the elephant is calling. And these calls appear to be directed towards specific individuals based on behavior, but we don't know that for sure. So here is a young female with a newborn. She's alone. She's resting, and she suddenly lifts her head. Her ears are stiff. So she's heard a call and answers. Now we hear distant callers. She listens, ears spreading and head swinging. She pauses, again, still listening. And then gives what I call a confirmation. The problem is these calls all look different. So then most antiphonal calling involves overlapping calls. So here's an example of a little greeting rumble, first Erin and then Enid. So it's typically a nasal rumble as an animal is approaching, and an oral rumble by the animal who's approached. It sounds like this. And what I call an as touched rumble. Calves, when they're touched by older members of their family, will give this rumble. And you can see at the beginning, there are calls by mother and sister, and also afterwards. And then he gives the louder call. I believe that this call develops into a little greeting rumble. And then cadence rumbles. These to me are the most fascinating calls because they have a cadence like a conversation. And these ones are between Enid and Eleanor, which was part of an hour-long vocal exchange through which they worked together to turn their family around and go in a different direction. So it sounds like this. So even in this exchange, the calls by the same individual, those louder ones, look different, and yet they're part of this long, whatever they're discussing. The median number of overlapping calls in a bout is 2, interquartile range 2 to 4, but we have had as many as 64 uninterrupted calls, overlapping calls. So I want to show you what a little greeting rumble looks like. It's very distinctive, and the behavior is also distinctive. It's associated with one elephant approaching the next, head raising, ear lifting, rapid ear flapping, and sometimes temporal gland secretion, and other greeting behaviors such as trunk to mouth and trunk to genitals. So here this young female approaches another young female with a calf. She calls, touches the baby. Notice the head raising and the lifted ears. So this is a kind of classic little greeting rumble. So they'll have been in the same group. They haven't been far apart, but it's just sort of like, hello, it's nice to be near you again. So unfortunately, I don't have audio for this, but I want to show it to you because it's sort of a classic example of the use of let's go rumbling and cadence rumbling that are often used together. The let's go call is a very long, unmodulated nasal rumble, and it's typically given by one or multiple callers working together to get elephants, the other members of the family, to go in a particular direction. And it's associated with particular behaviors such as waiting, walk waiting, body axis pointing, ear flapping, looking back, and intention movements. Sorry, I meant to say that's an example of a let's go rumble. But here's the behavior. So here's a group of elephants in the heat of the day. The matriarch is marked with an M, Big Mama, and a group of this family want to head south. And they start to walk, wait, take a few steps and stop, and point in the direction they want to go. Meanwhile, the matriarch is pointing in the opposite direction. This was a very long sequence. I shortened it. Again, walking and waiting. And when you see the ears flapping quite rhythmically, then that's calling. Like there, that would be a call. So these guys are calling and pointing south, and the matriarch pointing north. Now they start probably getting into cadence rumbles. I can't be sure, but the ones facing south then are persuaded to turn around the direction the matriarch wants to go. That is not always, the matriarch doesn't always win. Very often a young member of the family can persuade the elephants to go in another direction, or they may split. And sometimes the discussions that go around in deciding this, watch the matriarch now. She's going to give a hard ear slap, which is, okay, now I'm moving. And she gives another let's go and takes off, and everyone follows. But as I said, sometimes they will agree to disagree and go their separate ways. Sometimes they appear to agree on some sort of a compromise. And then there's chorus calling by numerous individuals. Here, I kind of have these, lump them together as bonding ceremonies, but we do describe mating pandemonium, female chorus, greeting ceremonies, and then there are others like coalition rumbles. So I'm not going to play these are far too long, but I'll play a little snippet just so that you can get an idea of what they sound like. I'll play this from the mating pandemonium, and you'll notice these powerful oral rumbles are overlaid with trumpets and roars. So this includes the estrus female who's just mated, as well as members of her family. And then I'll play these, what I call coalition rumbles. This is when the lion pounced on Amy's infant, and she called, faced the lion, and her calling was immediately responded to by more distant members of the family, who then came and helped them face off this lion. So I always refer to elephants as drama queens, and it's particularly because of these bonding ceremonies. You know, any little thing can happen in the family that really will set them off. And so I do use this kind of catch-all term for these powerful, throaty oral rumbles that are given in chorus when something happens in the family that deserves a celebration, like a greeting, a birth, arrival of a musk male, a mating, or requires females to work together, like to assist or show sympathy for a family member, form a coalition, take collective defensive and offensive action, something that we saw repeatedly in Gorongosa. Yeah, pretty scary. And these high intensity bonding ceremonies are accentuated by social trumpets, snorts, roaring, or combination calls like snort, rumble, rumble, roar, rumble. And they're also associated with head raising, ear lifting, rapid ear flapping, temporal gland secretion, urination, defecation, tusk clanking, open mouth to open mouth, trunk twining, and so on. In this video, the matriarch has a newborn. It's perhaps a day old, and there's a little allo mother, an adolescent female, trying to take care of the newborn. And the matriarch is not too happy with her, her involvement. And so in this video, the matriarch pushes the adolescent allo mother away, and the allo mother inadvertently knocks over the matriarch's newborn. And so everyone goes crazy. The infant roars, and family members touch him and rumble and snort and trumpet. And so I just decided to have a little fun with this, because it's just cacophony of sound. But I decided I would like to put what I think the elephants are saying. It's a little gimmicky, but you know what the elephants are saying to one another. And in doing so, I realized that I actually recognized some of the calls, whereas before it was just a mess of sound. So what I've done here is put the individual elephants are named, and the calling elephant, the writing appears over the calling elephant, and you can just enjoy. So in summary, we know that individual identity, arousal level, or emotional state is encoded in elephant rumbles. But can these be detected across other call types? Can format variability within rumble subtypes or context types offer more detail about what elephants are expressing to one another? We know that elephants use vocal referential signals, and we observe elephants to coordinate movement and actions, apparently discuss with one another, negotiate, make plans, reconcile conflicts, sympathize with one another. And so while rumble context types are highly variable, in some cases, and may in some cases only be subtly different, the elephants themselves show by their consistent behavior that they're able to discriminate emotion and meaning in these graded calls. So can machine learning help us to decipher what specifically they're able to say to one another? And I've defined a large number of call subtypes based on sound quality, behavioral context, and measurements. But can machine learning confirm these subtypes? For instance, is a greeting rumble different from a rumble given in a different sort of bonding ceremony? Can a begging rumble be consistently discerned from a separated rumble, or a let's go rumble from a cadenced rumble? We think that elephants are able to direct their calling to particular individuals. Can machine learning help us to determine whether elephants are using signature rumbles? And finally, wind noise and overlapping calls pose particular challenges to the automated analyses of elephant calls. So can computer technology isolate individual calls within these complex choruses, or those contaminated with wind or other frequency, low frequency noise? And thank you so much to many, many people. Thank you. I guess I need to stop the share.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Fantastic. I think we have maybe a couple of minutes for if somebody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question.
I have a question.
Go for it, Bernard.
Yeah, this is a fantastic talk. I have a question about the sort of universality of this sort of language. Like if you took elephants from a different breed, maybe elephants in Asia or something, would you recognize the same patterns of communication, or do you think it might be different?
Yeah, well, I did, we did have a short project in Sri Lanka. And although the calls are quite different, I remember thinking, well, at least I understood the elephants better than I understood the Sri Lankans speaking their language. No, but there are some similarities, but there are also differences. Looking at whether there might be dialects in different populations, for instance, the calls sound pretty similar, for instance, from Amboseli to down to Mozambique. And we have done some playbacks of calls in Botswana. The elephants there seem to recognize them as different. They responded differently to those calls. So, but we don't have answers really to your question.
Thank you.
Anybody else? We have in the Q&A, Joyce, can you see that? There are a couple of questions. I think there are questions.
I can see something, but
so it says, yes, I can read it to you. It says,
okay.
Joyce, I enjoyed your talk. Humans are vocal learners too. Some of their calls could be made by us. Do the elephants understand if you try to call them in their own language?
Oh, that's such a great question. I have to admit, it's a bit naughty, but I can make play trumpets. I'm not so good anymore, but I did one day make a play trumpets to this elephant, this juvenile who was going berserk around the car. And those play trumpets got her so riled up, and the other youngsters so riled up, that one of them came and sat down on the bonnet of my car. Another one stuck its tusks up onto the roof above my head, literally. And I just had to these are wild elephants. Another one came running at the car. She managed to find a tin can out in the park. I don't know how, but had that stuck on the tip of her trunk. So I can certainly make play trumpets and get them playing, if it's the right time of the day and if they're in the right mood.
I guess I have a question. What's the volume of the data that you have? How much data?
Oh, well, it's yeah, I think we talked about that before. I'm not sure I have it at the top of my head. Mm-hmm. Not enormous volumes like the Elephant Listening Project has just got recorders out in the forest recording, 24 hours a day kind of thing. So ours is all sitting with the elephants and recording behavior at the same time. But we do have, we have hundreds of hours.
Yeah. Okay, if there's no one else with questions, I think we'll move on to Lila.
Perfect. I think there are several questions in the chat. So Martha Mino is asking, a few questions.